all the blind spots represent a way that we're dissociated from our physical bodies.
You don't know blind spot. You just forget about it. You don't know it.
You need to have like a crisis to really start to get it.
Yes.
Like getting a little crack, a little taste of the blind spot in a real way. It's like it changes you. The whole ego, the whole personality is maintained through the tension the stacking represents. Integrating your blind spot does mean the outward circumstances of your life are going to have to fucking change.
The big hormone enneagram.
Hi, I'm John Lukovich, sexual self-pres, over the 5-wing, 458 trifix.
Hi, I'm David Gray, self-pres sexual 9 with a 1, 974 trifix.
What up? It's Emeka. I'm an 8-wing 7, sexual self-pres with 854 fixes.
Hi, I'm Nancy. I am a self-pres social 3, wing 4, with a 369 trifix. If you like our podcast, guys, make sure you go like and subscribe on the Apple Podcast app. And if you really like us, you should definitely leave us a review.
Welcome back to Big Hormone Enneagram. We are continuing to just really hawk and praise the wonderful insights I have generated in my new published book, The Instinctual Enneagram, on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles and other places. Last week we talked a little bit about an article I wrote that's like a kind of a preview of what's in the book. Today we're going to talk about blind spots, and in my view, the blind spot truly is a blind spot. We all think that our weakest or least integrated instinct, that we kind of know what it's like, and we kind of understand what that instinct looks like in other people and what the experience of it is, but we really do not understand not only what that instinct is, but also we're really unable to face the emotional consequences of what it would mean to see what we've lost by neglecting the blind spot. And I know that a lot of us, the 4 of us here, have had pretty intense ups and downs the last year that, at least from my point of view, has a lot to do with both this attachment hexad stuff we've been talking about, but also blind spot stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, in my book, we talk a lot about blind spot shit and integrating it and the importance of it. So I feel like the blind spot, accessing it is really it's sort of like if you were to like reach into like that in the back of your throat and like pull something out that's like been stuck in your throat that you didn't know was there, kind of like turning you inside out. Like when the blind spot gets more integrated, then the heart, I think, can really be affected in a certain way and can be online in a certain way that it just didn't know had the room to breathe in, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a big thing for me this past year was recognizing how, even from the perspective of defining or understanding what the blind spot is, that there's a way that we're invested in not understanding the blind spot. And so this thing that keeps happening over and over again on forums where people will post is, yeah, I kind of get my blind spot and I think I can, do it pretty easily. Does anybody else relate to this idea of not really having a blind spot? And I'm just like, you have no idea.
Right.
And I think one of the big things, at least with social blind, that hit me like a ton of bricks this year was recognizing that I didn't have any ability to see myself or even see that my actions and my behaviors and my signaling was creating like an avatar of who I am or what I represent in people's minds. I mean, it's like you can know that, but like actually feel that and have that impact me was a big deal in terms of my sexual attraction display. Understanding that, like the sort of impact that I was having or what that might mean about what I represent. And just like actually feeling into that, like feeling into not being able to really hold on to the idea that you have a role or you represent or sort of person thing that exists in people's minds, with the sort of a parasocial relationship thing that we've been talking about. That was a huge one, just recognizing how little I don't understand social from that point of view. So that's something I want to say is a lot of times people don't realize how invested they are in actually not grasping what the blind spot is.
Yeah, and I think as the sole SX blind here, one of the things I really struggle with integrating the sexual instinct is that it's not particularly useful.
Mhm.
Um, no offense, guys. Um, and so I have a really hard time not just being like, well, I can go through my whole life without ever really integrating it. Like,
Mhm.
don't worry about it. And pushing it
Right.
on the back burner. So it's just interesting how like each blind spot kind of finds a way to trick you into not really wanting to integrate it.
Yeah, that's a
And
really
the
good
and
point.
the and the integration of your core type with that blind spot is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like
It's
like
not
for me,
efficient.
right? Like for me as a 9 to be social blind 9 and to yet have, some online presence where I have somewhat of a name, but with
Mhm.
social blind, I don't get it and I don't know how to hold on to it. And
Yeah.
like you guys were at some point recently kind of pounding it into me, hey, you're David fucking Gray, and I
Right.
don't even know what that means. I have no idea what you're even telling me when
Real.
you say that.
It's interesting, the different responses to social blind. I'm sure with John being a 4 and I'm being an 8, I'm an assertive type, and so there is an ability to me to get really pragmatic about social from the perspective of, okay, I understand that I've been doing something publicly for a couple years and people have assigned a certain reputation to me, and there's a reputation that's building based on certain actions that I've been consistently taking. So from an assertive type, it's like, yeah, I can fuck around with that and play with that, but I forget that it exists. I can understand it and be like, all right, this is something I can work with as an assertive type, but as a day-to-day experience, it's just I forget that I have that sort of impact. And I have to consciously remind myself that there is a way that people respond to you, and you have to be aware of that.
The way I sort of it seems to me, Emika, like when you talk about recognizing like you as a social entity, it sort of sounds like you were standing in a room with like a candle like held to your chest, and that was all the light you could see, and then you turned on the light on the whole room. You know what I mean? Like it sort of feels like you're like, oh yeah, there's a whole thing that you just like, I don't know, that you didn't know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's as an 8, you could I can connect with it from social 8 and see how invested, a social 8 might be in terms of steering and shaping that perception, in a really forceful way. Because my energy isn't invested in that arena. So I can see how social 8s are really wanting to force that impression on people as to this is what I'm going to get you to think about me, and
Mhm.
really creating their reputation and all that kind of stuff. Um, so I can see that there are ways that maybe I'm unconsciously doing that, but I'm not. Yeah, it's just not. There's no intentionality there, and I don't have any real sense in the experience of it, and so just even being aware of it has been like a huge wow. I mean, I'm aware, but like really feeling into it, feeling into this impression that people are holding of me as an entity of some kind that has certain traits and things like that. It's been a really interesting ride.
Yeah, I would say for me, like, as a heart type, I'm like obviously very identified with my heart and emotions and things like this, and just the experience of the heart center. And being social blind, though, especially in relationship, like I didn't, I didn't realize how unhuman I took myself to be, like how much I did not see myself. I did not even have like a sense that I needed to be treated in certain ways,
Hmm. Yeah.
uh,
Mm, yeah.
and that I had certain emotional needs. And also being social blind, there is this like the 4s need to separate from everybody, like even more exaggerated. And so it's just like I was always very aware that I needed to be separate and I needed to be like untouched and non-contaminated by like human beingness. But man, there's like a way that I there's so much I did not see about being human, if that makes any sense. Like of the way just humans are and the way that they organize their attention and like the way they behave and the way that they like things that matter to them that like that are so fucking obvious, I think, to other people that I'm only now in my fucking 30s like coming to see. And it's hard to kind of get into without getting overly personal, but I just always felt like this deeply unattractive like freak boy, and I didn't realize like I couldn't read people enough. It's like often what I hear how people sort of talk about being aware of other people is either you're aware of people because you care about them or you're not aware about them because you don't care about them, like you don't care about other people's feelings or something. And it's like I care a lot about people's feelings, but like what I seem to care about is very narrow, but I didn't realize that.
Mhm.
And so like because of what cared about in other people, it's like I couldn't read. It's like I could only read a very limited like a few colors on a color spectrum rather than the whole spectrum of colors. Like I can only read these things. And so therefore I could only receive things from a certain range. And so it's like I just the sense of like how outside of a kind of life I was of terms of being loved, in terms of being yeah, I don't know, like it's hard to explain, but I've always had really deep friendships and connections and things like this, but there was something about how I was like what my expectations were for myself, and that like I just did not even realize.
Yeah, that's touching on some of that hexad attachment stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I had to recognize that, yeah, the social blind is a separation. There's a assumption of self-containment and like even the idea that people give a fuck about other people is hard to grasp it. But the hexat stuff really fucking amplifies that self-containment. And I'd like to eventually get some social blind Bermudas on here because I'd like to explore that contrast a little bit more. Just what does it mean to be social blind and triple attachment? But just watching the conversation or listening to the conversation between Joseph and Alexandra of a social hexat type and that need to separate, but also that need for relating and connection. How do you get those needs met? So just really interesting how Joseph still has that need for separation, but he's inevitably bouncing off of people's impressions and his connections with people, which if you're not doing that, you're really disconnected. If you're Hacksat and you're social blind.
Yeah, and like I've had periods where I'm like, oh, this is the social instinct, or and it's like, oh fuck, it's not,
Yeah, yeah. It's that blind. You don't know. You don't know blind spot. You just forget about it. You don't know it.
I constantly have that with sexual. I'm like, oh, and then I'm like, I don't think that was it.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm finding is that even beyond just these descriptions and cognitive understanding of these things, it's being confronted by people who are dominant in that instinct that forces you to actually be like, whoa, where's, because this is their water, this is what they're breathing in all the time. So being around people who are dominant in an instinct that is your blind spot is going to really confront you with it and be like, momentarily you might experience it, be like, oh shit, that must be social or that must be sexual.
Well, I also feel like, I mean, I've always had so many social type friends and things like this, but I feel like you need to have like a crisis to really start to get it.
Yes.
Like, because it has to shatter so much. Like I was talking to Alexandra about her being a sexual blind, and I asked her, how do you relate to sexual blindness, or like what do you feel like was the difference between like now that you feel more in touch with your sexual instinct and coming out a lot more and you've had this transition, what was going on before you felt like you had contact with it? She was like there was no pleasure in my life, and there was like I was doing everything without considering pleasure and without considering like what I really wanted from like a body level. And I said, but did you feel that way before? And she's like, no, if she didn't say it exactly like this, but the frame sort of like, if someone had tried to tell her you're not doing anything with pleasure, you're not experiencing real pleasure or enjoyment or something like that, she would have thought that person was an idiot and crazy and judgmental. But it's only when you come on the other side that you start to go, whoa, like the
Yes.
fuck. Like I thought, like I was like, oh yeah, no, I've got this. But like the blind spot is completely shattering, and it's none of us here have integrated our blind spots by any means. It's just like getting a little crack, a little taste of the blind spot in a real way. It's like it changes you.
And often it's the thing that makes the crisis is that it's affecting your dominant instinct. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And that's what
Mhm.
can
Yep.
shoot you into like this, like it actually becomes a threat. Like I had an experience of my social lastness threatening my self-pres and a job I was at one point. And I had to go through an actual crisis and people saying, hey, you're not joining the group like ever. Like, what the fuck's going on with you? Why are you just back in an office by yourself? And it's creating this dark impression. And so it was literally getting to the point where I could be fired because everybody had this sort of dark impression of me.
Mm.
And so because it was a threat to my self-pres, I said, oh, and I was learning about the instincts on the Riso Hudson board when we were having some of those early conversations about all of that. And it was like, oh, wow, I need to go out and be with the people and start doing all the chatter that they're doing every morning instead of being back in the office and going, oh, they're doing that thing that they do. So now I can do my thing inside my laptop and be even further away from them.
Goodbye forever.
Yeah.
People of this world.
Yeah. And that
Yeah.
was a pretty major wake up because it was like, and it is that heart, you mentioned the heart thing, because you do it and you start to open that crack a little bit. And it's like, oh, okay, there's this whole world that I was missing. And it kind of opens up this vista. I mean, it's going to close up again, but I mean, you're
Very
gonna,
quickly.
yeah, but I mean, but it's like, oh, okay, I had to have that experience of it in order to really even know what it was.
Mhm,
Yeah,
mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
I have that thing about the blind spot threatening the dominant instinct. I have
Mhm.
a formula in my book about how the stackings sort of are maintained out of fear that the blind spot is going to ruin the dominant instinct.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
like I identify in the book, like, and I go into all this shit, but like the basic fears of the instincts and how like the blind spot is going to open up that fear or open up the thing that's gonna the sort of threat to the dominant instinct. So like in the case of like just talking about David, self-pres sexual, if I express social by being too available and dispersed, it will create scarcity and harm by undermining my resources and foundations. For Emeka and I, sexual self-pres, if I express social, like in brackets, by being too available and dispersed, I won't be attractive and will be sexually overlooked. It's this thing of like, if I'm too open, too friendly, not concentrated enough, I'm not being specific enough, then who's gonna fucking want me or notice me or anything?
You're dissipated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, like
Uh,
if you were posting like I was available to the extent that a lot of social types are, which in my distorted social blind view is letting people in on your what's going on with you and sort of just making yourself available for connection on a regular basis, that there's not going to be anything hooking about me. There's not going to be
Right.
anything that can pull or
or specific.
draw somebody in. That's another thing I wanted to get into because our descriptions of sexual are going to be skewed by our types, and there's with all of us being 4-fixed or 4s, there's an emphasis on specificity and distinctness that makes its way into our descriptions. And one thing that I've been in conversations with Beth is that other sexual types who might not be as specific types, like, attachment types, although they still relate to that thing of wanting a specific flavor of their own. It's not going to be necessarily the same type emphasis on that, 4 or 5 or 8 or 7 might put on being colorful and interesting. There might be, other sexual displays that have to do with just being charming, like 2 or even like 9. It's a little bit softer and more interpersonal than more like having these distinct hooks. But yeah, just like, being too available, which ruins the mystique of whatever that sexual display might be from the perspective of that person's type or from the perspective of what their preferred display hooks might be.
Right. Well, like, I mean, yeah, I think that's a really, really good point about the type situation. Cause like, I mean, using what I just spoke to, the formulas, it is amazing how much, I've spoken on the pod about my jealousy stuff. And a lot of it is like, I have this complete terror that I'm replaceable, like in a sexual way, or that, like, I don't know if I've mentioned this here before, but like, in the movie Titanic, like, isn't the whole movie like, I don't, the whole movie is, right, like, it's about like the main character Rose telling her granddaughter about like a dude she was in love with that was not her grandpa, right?
I don't know. I didn't watch
I don't know
Titanic,
that movie.
Yeah, I don't. I
I
haven't seen it either, but like, I know that, I think that the movie is about like this old
Yeah.
woman telling like
Yeah,
her granddaughter, like, before, and I don't even know if maybe Leonardo DiCaprio was her grandpa or not, but like, she meets this like poor guy on the Titanic or something, and then he dies, and she's telling this story to a granddaughter, but to me it was like, and maybe I'm misrepresenting the whole movie, but like, she's talking about a guy that she fucked and remembers deeply and tenderly that's not who she ended up with.
Yeah.
And like, that shit is horrifying to me. Like, that he got under her skin. Like, that's the real soulmate thing. Like, that's the real connection. Like, that's the one close to her core. And then, oh, she just got with some fucking guy. And so this thing of replaceability and like, oh, but like, and my 4 special, extra special, it's like, no, this has to be destined by the stars, or else like, I'm just a complete, like, just replaceable cog that you could just, that you just like being around. There's nothing special here, So the social instinct feels like it's going to get into this, like, oh, but anybody could be my partner's partner. Like, anybody could be a good, acceptable person or attractive person or whatever. It's just horrifying.
And that does fit kind of an aspect of what social is kind of like roles. You know what I mean? Like you fit this box, and so that means a bunch of people, or
a bunch of people fit other boxes.
People fit into boxes, and so you could just replace a box with another box or whatever.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that terrifies me.
That gets back into some of the things that Alexandra has mentioned about what her fears are being with you, and which to me came off like an example of what sexual blindness can be. Because when you have social and self-pres, and you're looking at social and self-pres, you kind of, everybody sort of fits these categories of what attractive is. So let's say height, fitness, and hair, and symmetry, and how well you're doing with your career, and that kind of stuff is like self-pres social type of attraction strategies. And so when you take out sexual, which is like whatever your specific flavor might be that is distinct to you, not necessarily distinct, but it's like, you're kind of like instinctual pheromones that you've cultivated. When you take that out, then it's like, well, why couldn't my partner meet a better version or replacement for me without sexual? So you need all three to, and in your case, it's like, well, if I allow myself to make myself more available to people and things like that, it's going to take away from this really self-contained thing that I've got going on, which is the only reason she's with me.
Yeah. Well, my strategy, unconscious instinctual strategy for not getting left or cheated on is like, you're going to be addicted to me. Like, it's like, you're not going to find anything like me. And you have like, our chemistry be so much that like, it's not that you just don't want to cheat or you choose not to. It's like you fucking can't because I've ruined every other body.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And so like with her, you know, I'm addicted in a chemical way to like, you know, she has naturally curly hair and she's been letting herself just do her curly hair. And I'm like fucking intoxicated by it. And we were on the train with, you know, like, and I'm like her smells and all this kind of like just all her natural shit, all like the personality stuff that is in 9 that she felt like she had to shut down. I like fucking love. And we were on the train with my sexual 9 friend the other day, and completely unprovoked, he was talking about his wife, and he was like, "Yeah, I just love to lick her armpit and you know, all the other like other stuff that I do."
Oh my God.
That's like this level of like chemical addiction, and it was sort of reassuring for her to hear that I'm not just like making this shit up. That's like this is what it is. You know?
Yeah, it's like instinctual pheromones. It's like you're not going to be able to find it in some other. Even if you found someone that looked like them, they wouldn't have the same instinctual pheromones. It's not the same thing. So
that is so funny.
It's got to be that level for me. You know, it's got to be that level of this is where it is. Like our bodies have to choose each other. It's like that's what sexual instinct is like there's no choice in it.
Right.
You know?
I want to say this also because this is something that I've recognized in myself over the years, because I saw that people could say that they were into me or they thought I was hot, but from the perspective, at least in my view, from the perspective of other instincts, like like, oh, this guy's attractive, I want to fuck him. But I was looking for attraction signaling that was on the level of the sexual instinct, because any guy can be tall and in shape with interesting hair or any of these, you know, insert another person with those qualities and you're going to get that same response from a certain percentage of people. So I was looking for responses that had to do with things that maybe other people would find repulsive about me, but that person was responding to. That's the attraction that I thought, you know, from a sexual instinct point of view, like my instinctual pheromones were being responded to. So like, oh yeah, I want to fuck that guy, or I think he's hot. It's like, so fucking what? There's another guy that fits the same category that you could go feel the same way about.
Right.
Sexual's like you're a really specific designer drug, and so you're the only source for that drug.
Totally.
Yeah.
And so,
and also just getting into how different that can be, even, you know, from the genders and even within the same type. I had to sort of zoom back. I think I said this on the last one, that by my interest in all this stuff that we do with Enneagram, I've sort of created an elaborate like attraction vision quest that if you could somehow make it through being into the same stuff, that we'd end up next to each other somehow. And which is, you know, I didn't plan it. I didn't envision that would happen.
Yeah.
But that's how I ended up meeting Beth. So everyone's instinctual hooks are going to be different, and what attractiveness means is going to be specific. So it's like I don't recognize anything that's not outside of this box that I've created, which ends up attracting all you guys into my life. You know.
And yeah, so like you know, just to have one of these areas of life shut down or not really give it that much attention or to minimize it, it's like you just cannot have any idea of what you're missing. And it's a lifelong thing of continuing to open your eyes in the blind spot instinct. And we haven't really talked about self-pres blind. None of us are self-pres blind, but I mean, God, like, I mean, Emeka, like maybe.
I'm learning about self-pres blind. Jesus Christ. I learned, or I mean, I reread that chapter today, and I asked her if she'd read it, and she said she did read it, and she had to put it down because it was hitting some really painful core stuff.
Good.
But I mean, the big one that I noticed is sort of like the reoccurring unconscious disasters that keep popping up. It's like self-neglect, like just really specific. I'm sure you base that description off real life experiences that you have, because there's like some really specific shit in there about how self-pres blinds can be really busy and sort of like not being aware of the cost of physical expenditure.
Mm-hmm.
Really busy, but then that ends up creating these fucking disasters where they have to collapse and recognize the cost of what they're doing. And this is something that I'm watching play out with Beth, and just fucking overworking, and which ends up creating all these injuries and ailments, and then have to completely come to a screeching halt. And it's like, wow, I'm watching it up close. It's pretty fucking incredible.
Right. Like, yeah, so, I've had non-romantic relationships, but involved personal relationships with some people who are self-pres blind, and like the both sexual and social crave different flavors of connection. But like in the experiences I had was people who were not that healthy, and it was like, yeah, like disasters and having to bail them out, and a lot of like bailing them out, but like there's a lot of emotional, basically manipulation, but I don't think they would see it as that. Where there's like little like relational carrots, you know what I mean, of like how we're like together in this or something like this, but they keep having disasters, and so there's this like unconscious outsourcing of like their own needs and their own self-preservation instinct to other people, and so they're like craving connection and of different kinds at the same time as they're driving people away, because people are like, I can't keep fucking cleaning up this mess for you, and I can't, like, I can enjoy your personality, I can enjoy being around you, and you're getting that kind of attention, but like things can't go that deep. And this is not everybody, this is an unhealthy person, but like they can't go that deep without that kind of rootedness in yourself. And so I know a lot of just like perpetual children that are self-pres blind, that are like in their 60s or whatever, but they can't have any really deep, meaningful connections. They might have some like sort of sexual instinct, like bam, kind of experiences with people, and then go, that's a deep connection. But without that, it's like having an earth element in your astrology chart or something. It's like you need that kind of like tether. And otherwise, like, self-pres blinds can get in these dynamics where they're stuck to people relationally who provide the self-pres instinct for them, but they don't even really like the relationship they're in, even though they're such a relational stacking.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's just because for me, it's like, okay, this is probably going to be a problem. Let's not go that direction. It's like, well, I'm going to go that direction anyway. Big problem. Now we're sort of fixing it. So it's interesting to watch how that's a way to keep a relationship going, or just there's a relational aspect of that.
Yeah.
That, the problem arises, and that's sort of like we all hands on deck. We got to deal with it. But
you're in it together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it got me thinking of the different ways that maybe all the blind spots are doing disasters, because you're not paying attention to it. So like that probably means there's going to be some collapse at some point on a regular basis, probably.
Well, I mean, the one thing is, maybe this is the most obvious thing in the world, but each instinct represents such a huge swath of what it is to be a human being.
Yes.
So it's actually insane that we're completely blind in like a whole third of what it is to be a person.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's a radical imbalance that's gonna, fuck you over multiple times, in your life.
Totally.
Yeah.
Could you read what the self-pres one blind, or not self-pres, sexual blind is, John?
Yeah, you mean like the formula thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for self-pres social, if I express sexual by being too provocative and unstable, it will create scarcity and harm by undermining my resources and foundation.
Okay.
And the converse of the social self-pres, if I express sexual by being too provocative and unstable, I will alienate others and be ostracized and abandoned.
Yeah.
Like, for example, Nancy, you were talking about like being wary of coming out to the zone because you knew that if you came out that you would not be able to continue the routine that you've got going on, because you knew that something would be shifted and changed. That's like saying, fuck that sexual instinct. I'm not.
Totally.
Pretty much. Pretty much. I was thinking about how the lack of sexual instinct has fueled the capitalist monster of America.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
Because nobody's enjoying themselves.
No, no. And we're all just like, well, I have to do this to get by. And if everyone stopped doing what they have to do to get by, the world would come to a grinding halt and we would no longer have to do that shit.
Like culture is closer to in warmer climates, for whatever reason, at least it maybe have more sexual types, or at least there's more sexual instinct in the culture. And so people like, oh, Europe and Spain and Italy and France, or the Caribbean, or Central America, like all these kind of places where they're like, yeah, it's more like a relaxed way of life. It's like, well, there's more sexual instinct. It's not necessarily that their sexual instinct is relaxed. It's that there's like a greater priority of what's not useful, what's useless and what's indulgent, and there's just a value of a certain kind of decadence, but it's not a decadence that is kind of creepy or wrong, because it's like all about like what your body is actually what level your body's actually wanted to be met on, so it's not a violation. It's like, some people who like with low sexual can like totally overindulge in things because they're not listening to their body, like all kinds of frivolous sex or whatever, or that there's no prescriptive way that everybody needs to be, but it's like all the instincts represent a dissociation, or all the blind spots represent a way that we're dissociated from our physical bodies.
The point you're making about, like, not to say that sexual blinds don't have a good time, like there are definitely hedonists that are sexual blind, but what you end up seeing with people who have those sort of patterns is they get into a routine. That is a routine. Maybe there's certain drugs and certain sexual patterns that they have that they just, the thing about the sexual is that you don't know what direction you're going to get pulled into, and there's a sense of kind of destroying what you were into before, so it's going to lead you into new directions that sort of renew the whole thing, so creating new patterns. Whereas hedonist sexual blinds can get pretty into the same pattern. So like some rock stars who have like body counts into the thousands. It's like, well, how do you just keep fucking groupies year after year? That's the sexual blind spot. Like just doing the same thing every year.
A lot of fuckboy energy is sexual blind. Because it's just like, I'm not even here for it.
Right. You're not getting hooked. You're not getting taken by this sort of drug addicted problem or whatever of the sexual instinct, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
All the self-pres over here just fucking sexual instinct over. We're like, bye. That was a fun time.
Yeah. I mean, the ability to have, not to say that every sexual type is incapable of doing this, because I know certainly some sexual types who do have a lot of casual sex, but the ability to have like easily have casual sex and not really get pulled into any specific person, to rack up a bunch of bodies, that's definitely like a sexual blind sort of thing.
Yep.
Well, in doing that, it would be like people maybe seeking out for hookups, people that are not going to activate them very much.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, that's a big part of it. Because Nancy, when we talked about like, or asked you like to make a collage of people you're attracted to, you fucking drew a blank, and I was like, maybe this is the problem for me with these hookups. It's like I can't even get going hooking up with someone that I don't have a chemical response to, or like I'm not feeling there's got to be some hook for me to be able to get into it, which means that if there is a hook in there, that means that the capacity for me to fall into that person is pretty high. Whereas it seems like at least I've seen observing people in bars that they're just picking whoever's there that is just meets an attraction threshold. Like, this person's fuckable. Yep. I'm going to do it with them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, and the terrible part for me as a terrible human was if you got hooked to me, that made it even better. I was like, power.
Interesting.
Great.
I mean, say more about all that, Nancy, of like going for people that maybe you weren't as turned on by or something.
Well, I think it. All right, geez, John.
We gotta get to what makes us suffer here.
Okay. Well, I think it had a lot to do with if I find someone like really attractive, or if I like really think they're going to like get to me, on like a next level, then like I might be vulnerable with them, and like that's a whole fucking thing that I don't want to deal with. Like, I don't want to become vulnerable with someone. I want it to just be sex. Right? And if I am not super into them, I'm not going to connect and become vulnerable or feel vulnerable or have them connect with me. They might accidentally connect with me, but like not the real me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just easier, it's simpler. I can have that connection and then I can leave, and then like it doesn't mess up my life, and go into work the next morning and pretend it never happened.
Well, okay, question. Because I'm thinking from the point of view that if I'm sort of having a above neutral reaction to somebody, that I'm not really going to be able to really get off. I can get off, but it's, you know what I mean? Like the quality of the orgasm is not going to be that great if you're not that into it. So does that not have an effect on the kind of sex that you're having in that?
I think it does. I think it does, but it's like really like good. This is gonna confuse you. Really good sex where I like have really good orgasms and it's like a big connection for me is more tiring.
Mm,
Like I don't have as much energy after that. Like
yeah,
I
I get
need
that.
I need a lot more aftercare and like, just shit afterwards. And like I can't just leave and go back home and go eat ice cream and watch Netflix.
Okay, I see what you're saying. But you're going to be more affected.
Yeah, like there needs to be like if they're not sticking it through with me, like they're not like, like with me, there needs to be a separation.
Mm,
I
I
need to be
see.
able to go home and like leave.
What's the benefit from your stacking point of view of not being affected, or what are you trying to keep on track?
I guess like a routine, like I want to be able to go like I don't want to be affected the next day, because if it affects me the next day, I may not get all my work done. If I don't get all my work done, I'm going to be stressed, and I'm going to be emotionally unavailable to what I'm doing that day, and it kind of spirals out of control to no longer having control over my life. If I get like hooked onto something, I might lose control of my life.
That's a really good way to put it.
Social 3. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like
That's a really good way to put
if
it.
you, I always hated when boys would try to like, or not try, but they would like fuck with me the night before like work or something, because like then it's gonna ruin my entire day. It's gonna ruin my entire week. Because it's gonna put me behind. Like I'm no longer
Fuck.
in control. You're in control, and that pisses me off.
Fuck with you as in they're inside you, like emotionally, mentally.
Yeah, like either they would hurt my feelings or they would like it's usually like they would hurt me in some way. That's the only way that I really get affected, is if you hurt me. And then it like takes over my whole world.
Mm.
And it's like that's not cool. Now and it's not even that like I'm sad, it's that I'm pissed that I can't get my shit done.
Mhm.
Like yeah, I'm sad, but it's like my mom would always get so annoyed with me. She's like, you're not angry, you're sad. And I'm like, no, I'm fucking angry because I
Interesting.
can't get my shit done.
Yeah, I mean, the blind spot I think is the most practical way to really transform, because it's like there's like a spider's web connecting the basic like fears and desires of your type and how those are run through your instinct, which those fears keep your blind spot blind.
Hmm.
And so it really is like a thread that you just like unravel the whole thing if you're really doing the work on your blind spot, because it's like the whole ego, the whole personality is maintained through the tension that the stacking represents. And then when it's like, if you were affected in a way that like overpowered your work and overpowered your control of your life, I mean, then your heart would be affected in all kinds of ways.
Hmm.
And then your heart's affected, your whole personhood is affected.
Yep.
So I mean, and this social instinct for me, it's like it's funny. Like a couple years ago, I thought to myself, like, man, I have no regrets in life. Like I am, I was like, yeah, this is great. And now, like, now that I've seen what I've seen about myself in my life, I'm like, man, it was all for nothing. It was all these years were wasted, in a way. They feel all artificial or something because I didn't see the way that the limitation of my social instinct really did skew my picture of what how I understood and experienced love.
Mhm.
That's a big one. I don't know where you landed on your in the book on the subject of the connection between social instinct and the heart and so forth. Is there something you can say about that?
I don't really get into that level of whatever, but I do talk about I do talk a lot about the heart and what the transformation of the instincts means on the heart level, like in terms of freedom of the heart. But it's a really good question. It's hard for me to piece out. It's like,
I mean, part of where I'm going to is just, I mean, I'm thinking of conversations over the last few years online and elsewhere or whatever, but, it's somewhat the thing of like if the social instinct, it sort of stems from the parenting instinct, so to speak, that's a kind of, uh, well, there's sort of a tether there to like real heart to heart
mhm,
connection that is very much uh, dissimilar to the whole objectification thing of the sexual instinct or the
mhm,
sort of me first survivalism of self-pres, right? So there's
right.
a way that social in some ways maybe is almost the instinct that starts to be the bridge in the animal, so to speak,
Yes,
towards the heart.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like the biological origins of the social instinct are in parenting. And all the bullshit that people normally boomers basically like to ascribe to the sexual instinct is social instinct. All the one-on-one stuff, all the I love intense connections and relationships, all that's social. But it can have when there's not the sexual instinct involved, it can have and self-prize. It can have this kind of what like roles to fill. It can be connected yet
Like
impersonal.
boxes to check.
Yeah, exactly. It can be very much like this, like pattern and role based rather than the living relationship. And so, kind of like when the self pres is there of that, like what's really bringing me, like what's rooted to something real, and the sexual, like what's like providing this life force. It's like when all three of those are together, then it's like the heart can really actually open up and connect and touch. There's there's a like the heart is really the organ of contact from a sensitive or subtle point of view. Like, when we love somebody, they're in our hearts. We talk like having a heart to heart. It's like you can touch somebody physically and there's no touching, but the heart is what really contacts on a being level. And if you're filtering out one of the instincts in your relationships and connections, then your relationships and connections are going to be like a three-legged stool that only has, that should have three legs but only has two legs. They're going to be shallow without all three instincts being there. And it's again like we go, oh, yeah, I have really good deep relationships, and it's like, yeah, you probably do, maybe, but there's so much more possible and available, and integrating your blind spot does mean the outward circumstances of your life are going to have to fucking change. It's not like you get to just
Hmm.
integrate your blind spot without
Right.
things changing. It's
Yeah.
going to change you, and it's going to change the way you live and the relationships you have. And you might go, this person is a perfectly fine partner or boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, or this job or whatever is good, or it should be what it should be, hitting my back walls, all this stuff, but it's not. And when you get that blind spot, you like really see like this is not doing it for me. And then you have to make some real choices, because if your blind spot's a little bit awake, you're going to feel like your life force is being snuffed out.
You're
So,
really not selling this.
so John, how has your, uh, being confronted with your blind spot in relationship with Alexandra how has that woken you up?
Like I was saying before, there's just a way I didn't really realize I was a person. uh, I didn't really realize a certain kind of being seen, kind of like Emma you've been speaking about with like like that you're learning to see yourself in a certain way. Like I mean, I'm even experiencing that in my intimate relationship. You know, like there's a way I just didn't even know I needed to be seen, and like having a sacredness of connection recognized,
Mhm.
and it's like as a sexual type, I've always looking as I was spoken to earlier of like irreplaceable from this point of view, just being so juicy, but also like like being an irreplaceable, unique person that if my dick stops working, that I'm still going to be loved ferociously,
Yeah.
that kind of shit has been like, especially, I'm as a heart type, it's been a real thing.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think that's one thing that Alexandra mentioned on the last one was that all the different ways the social blinds are not depersonalizing ourselves,
Yeah.
which in a way kind of invites that same sort of reaction from people too, which is something I've been trying on and trying to figure out. Is that I think we talked about this in the chat at some point, is that the thing that our personality is doing to ourselves is sort of this type of we're inviting that from other people too. So, the social blind depersonalization that we're doing, people are reacting to us in a similar way. And so it sort of reinforces it. So I think a big wake up call for me, at least this year, with the soul connections that I've had with this year, is that I had to accept or be open to being seen for who I was, and that even recognizing that that was a thing, that there was an impression of me out there being received by people, just blew me away. So
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. It seems like I think talking about a blind spot can feel like a little kid,
Yeah.
like I didn't know people saw me, or like I didn't know I was not attracted to this person, or like I don't know how to feed myself, and it's like, I mean, it's fucking wild because
Yeah.
our sense of what we think we can, our sense of measuring reality really is not accurate. And I know I'm gaslighting everybody, but the fact is that like from a point of view of inner work, like we have to accept that our ways of understanding and seeing and determining our moving through the world are not reliable, without like just being completely like flaccid about it. But it's like what we think we know, we don't, or there's more to learn about what we think we know. And yeah, so like part of the blind spot instinct and working on it is that we have to feel infantilized, and we have to feel like humiliated, and we have to feel childish. And we go, oh, I'm in my 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and I didn't know this shit. That stuff is fucking wild, and it hurts.
Mhm.
How much we wasted, how much of life we've wasted.
Oh yeah.
And this has nothing to do with how intelligent somebody is. This is
Mhm.
something that people run into
yeah.
with saying that, oh, I'm so self-aware. I think I know myself pretty well, so I should be able to figure out what my type is. And it's like, no, I mean, everybody fucking has blind spots. Like,
Yeah.
there's just certain things you can't see about yourself.
And you
People,
have like an entire ego set up around the idea of keeping you from seeing that blind spot.
yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Like some of the biggest reactions we've had recently tend to be from people who have the most experience with psychology or
Yeah.
this field, who feel like
Mhm.
they should know and can't allow themselves to be confronted with the fact that they don't know things about themselves. And so that becomes a whole thing where people think that I'm smart enough and I'm self-aware enough that I should know this stuff. It's like, no, actually you don't. That's if you already had the answers, then there wouldn't be any point to inner work, to the Enneagram, you're done. You're finished. You're perfect already.
Right. And that's a really good point. That's something I've been noticing too, is like people can have a lot of background and shit and they know this other system or they have all these certifications and qualifications. And, that can present itself as a huge obstacle to learning something new. And like, I think people complain about this with a lot of academics, and it's kind of this thing you always have to be like mindful that like, yeah, there is a thing called expertise and it's like a real thing. But at the same time, there's a thing of how we can create these mind palaces where it's like, I've got all the qualifications, so I should never have to be infantilized or never have to humble myself or pretend or have somebody teach me something or even suspect that there might be something outside of my awareness, like outside of how this should have gone or something like that.
And one of our points here collectively is that even us, quote unquote, knowing this stuff or having our attention on these things and these blind spots, our blind spot is continuing to it's going to keep manifesting.
Yep.
Yes.
And we're going to keep being blind. The crack will open and there'll be a little bit of sunlight. We'll see it for a little bit, but it's going to close again. So it's not an arrogance thing or whatever, our blind spot is going to stay alive too,
Right.
Yeah, we aren't going to overcome it someday.
Yeah.
Right.
A lot of times people are wanting a quick fix solution to how do I integrate my blind spot, and the hard answer is that it's a never-ending process. And those of us who have been aware of this material for years are maybe a little bit better in that arena, but it's not like we've been transformed by knowledge of this. It's like it's really hard work to make any real substantial change because your whole life is going to be changed and how you live your life is going to be affected. That doesn't happen overnight, and it's kind of difficult to do. So I think a lot of times people underestimate the amount of attention and work it would take to make any real meaningful changes in these blind spots.
And another thing too is that I like to emphasize, and we've said it in different ways already on the call, but is you'll really know the blind spot. One of the ways you'll know that you're facing it is when you realize how stupid you think that instinct is. Just like that. Why the fuck is anybody doing social? Like, why are you people doing that?
Right.
Stop doing it. Stop being so busy with it. What are you doing? Stop.
Yeah.
This is dumb.
That is something that should be emphasized, because a lot of times people will post and say that they read a blind spot description and they get it. And it's like, if you are not disgusted by your blind spot, because that's the whole point, is that your dominant instinct is invested in pushing away from the blind spot. So if you really, really got a taste of it, you're going to be disgusted. You're going to want to push because you're pushing away from it all day long.
Yeah.
And so if all day long, you don't want to feel it, sense it. And so to actually feel it and sense it is going to create such a bodily sense of aversion that if you're not feeling that, then you haven't even really tapped into the blind spot yet.
Great point. Yeah, one of the things I'll see people do in the group is they will post things like they'll attribute something that belongs maybe to social to sexual.
Yeah.
And so that's a way that they resist seeing their blind spot, because they're like, oh, it's actually pretty evenly distributed, but it's like not actually working with a right definition or sense of what these categories are.
Mm-hmm.
And I see people shuffle them around to kind of avoid seeing the big void in their life. Another thing about the blind spot that we all have is a lot of conditions around where the blind spot is appropriate in ourselves and other people. And so, like, just today there was a thread about like close friendships, and like I definitely have really close friendships, but I'm also like, yeah, but that's like I can't do that all the time, like. and one of my good friends is a bartender who's sexual blind, and nothing enrages him like people making out at the bar. And I'm like a very pro PDA human being. Like when I see people making out or whatever in public, I'm like, yeah, fuck yeah, go for it, I applaud, I'm like celebrate the pollens and the bees pollinating the flowers, and, keeping the circle of life moving. Whereas he just is like, he just gets so resentful of it. So like, people who might be like sexual blind might be like, yeah, I love sex, I love relationships, I love all this kind of stuff, but come on, not here. Like, why do you need so much attention? Why do you need this?
That is incorrect. I don't know what you're talking about.
Why are you throwing it in our faces, kind of a thing? And it's like,
Yeah.
they're just in the corner kissing. Is that in your face? But
Yes.
it's like it feels in your face to the blind spot.
It's like, stop grabbing her ass, Jesus Christ.
Right. Whereas like as social blind, when people are doing social stuff, I'm like, God, people have nothing else to do. Like,
Yeah.
it just feels like a
And
waste of time.
chat. Those
Yeah.
damn chatters.
They're like just saying a couple nice sentences to each other, and I'm like, God, what a time waster.
Totally.
They could be studying Egypt.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I noticed, because it's like it's a experiential thing, and like noticing what sets you off, what triggers you. And I can see like what you're saying, where with social, just like everyday expressions of social, like I'll notice like Beth will be like, telling me about someone saying this in some group, and I'm just like way more annoyed than I need to be about. It's like, why are we talking about this right now?
Yeah.
That's really funny. This explains a lot of conversations I've had with people where I like try to talk to them about like funny things that happened at the office when I was talking to this one person, and they just get so bored by it. And I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. I thought this was hilarious.
Yeah, exactly. So I might have to get going. I don't know if there's anything else we should do, but I think if we stop here, or we do a little bit more than stop, maybe next time we can talk more about like the actual integration of it. Like,
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like that.
because like, it is a body level phenomenon, and you can say that, but it doesn't really mean much. So you got to like, practice it. And I don't know, maybe the approaches might be helpful to talk about next time.
Yeah, like the one thing I liked about reading about the approaches is that, just trying to put words to what's going on, for example, with the collage exercise, which is, people putting images together, which is a demonstration of what their relationship to some psychological boundaries and sensation. Like this is what feels right to me.
Right.
And you sometimes ask people what their reactions are to collages made by people that have other instinct stackings, and it's like, well, that just feels wrong. It's not maybe necessarily the images are bad, it's more that the way they're put together doesn't feel right. And that's saying something about like, each instinctual stacking has a set relationship to certain physical sensations and relationship to certain psychological boundaries that affect even the way that we view and experience aesthetics. Yes. And that's really cool because you're outlining certain approaches that can show up in abstract space like aesthetics.
Yeah, no, that'd be really interesting to kind of more concretely try to link and see where I got things wrong, and all these kind of things of like seeing what connections we can make from that point of view.
Absolutely.
All right. This is good. I'll talk to you later.
Okay, bye.
All right, later.
Bye, guys.
Later.